Okay, what is up, YouTube? Long time no see. I know I did a OAD stream a little bit ago. Unfortunately, got caught up because my life can't be without stress for too long. You see, I got Donnie in here with me. You probably saw the title. The Purge begins. If you haven't seen the news story yet, your mind's about to get blown. But we're gonna go ahead and lead in with that. Let me just tell you right now, from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m., if you live in Pittsburgh, you should probably leave. You should look for a new place to live immediately. Go live with your grandparents. If someone is down the road, I would get out of that area immediately. So, with that being said, go ahead and do the calls to action that I'm terrible about. Subscribe to me on YouTube if you enjoy the show, if you enjoy what you see, if you enjoy what we talk about. Follow me on X too. That's the mainstay of the page. It's be where the majority where you're going to see my content being posted, clips, etc. I'll still put most of what I can on the back end on YouTube for the bigger things, but mainly all the different smaller clips will be what you find there on X, as long as my my thoughts throughout the day. Follow us on Spotify as well. We do exist there too. And then share the show. And like I said, Donnie's in here with me. Who are you, sir? What do you do?
I am Donnie Brook. I am a political junkie, punk rocker, just a guy that's been around the block and is paying attention to this stuff.
A paying, I said it wrong. A noticer, as you would. A noticer of things. As what's funny is very few people actually even care to notice things or patterns or behaviors for that part. And that's quite frankly part of the reason why we are in the predicament we are today. And so with that being said, guys, the only announcement I have today is we are aiming still to get up to 100 followers on Spotify. I would love to be able to monetize the podcast as soon as we can, give us bigger name recognition, allow people to kind of willingly put their name with our brand and kind of proliferate it to be a bit more professional. So let's go ahead and get this started. I have it pulled up on my screen. Let me switch over here and get it off of Donnie. You see, we got a tweet from Tim Pool. He says, it's starting. And what's funny is, Tim Pool has been banging on his chest for a while now, Civil War, to the point that he's been memed about it. Well, it looks like he was right. Right in a sense. So this tweet here is from the libs of TikTok. I do have the clip. I want to talk about it first. It reads, the Pittsburgh police will no longer respond to certain calls, including theft, harassment, criminal mischief, and burglary alarms. Between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m., there will be no officers at any police stations. The tweet says, buy guns, buy ammo, the police will not protect you. So I want to go ahead and listen to this clip real quick, and I want to swing it back over to Donnie and get his opinion. There's the volume. Okay.
Takeaway today.
Yeah, Susan, residents of the city will see a major change in the way police respond. They will no longer respond to calls that aren't considered in-progress emergency. That means calls like criminal mischief, theft, harassment, and most burglary alarms will all be handled by an enhanced telephone reporting unit. That means residents will file a police report over the phone. Officers will not respond unless it's an emergency. Also, between the hours of 3 a.m. and 7 a.m., there will be no officers at any of the 6 stations throughout the city. Call boxes that link directly to 911 have been installed for people to use in case of an emergency. And during the overnight shift, there will be as few as 20 officers to cover the entire city. The chief said today the data supports that.
Yes, it's enough to cover the entire city in those hours when we have 8% of the time people are calling. I'm confident in the decisions that we make that it impacts this bureau and the city in a much better way than we have in the past.
Now, the chief also acknowledging today that some of these changes are due to staffing shortages. He's down to 740 officers, well below the 850 they would like to have. Now, coming up new at 5, residents, city council, and the police union all weighing in on these big changes that begin Monday. Live in the studio, Rick Earl, Channel 11 News.
I mean, I got a lot to say about that, but I'll let you go ahead and rip it, Donnie. What do you think, man?
I'm kind of bummed I get to go first because you said it best, right? The purge is starting. And what's going to happen in these Democrat cities, it's already, hard to get guns in a lot of them. And now they're saying, well, the police aren't going to be around and they're not going to respond to burglaries and stuff. They're literally feeding the people that voted them to the wolves. In my opinion, with a lot of these policies, including this, which I mean, what else would you call it other than a purge?
I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, the crazy part that I didn't catch, I watched this already, but the crazy part I didn't catch when I watched it the second time, they're aiming for 850 officers. They're at 150. Like, that's not even like a quarter. You're like at an eighth of what you should be at. I mean, if my math is correct, it's probably closer to a seventh. But beyond that, too, like, I had assumed that the 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. was where the phone line became a thing. But the way they describe it is like, no, like all kind of police reports will be handled through phone call only. You know, I'm assuming to do that, to get more of the burden off the officers, if you only have 140 in the entire city of Pittsburgh, like that seems insane to me.
So a tough city too to be without police.
Right,
It's not
right.
it's not known as a gentle place. You know what I mean? And if I was a criminal and I was watching this, I'd be taking notes like no police from this time to this time.
Exactly.
Like,
Well, that was my
I
first
mean,
thought
it's
was
gonna
like,
be
they're going to start pouring in because they saw the 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. Like they announced it. Like, why would you
yeah, they got
announce
a
it?
heads up for it. Yeah.
I just,
Very convenient. I mean, and the criminals aren't stupid. You know, people already figured out, oh, we can go steal stuff in blue states where we can't get arrested. We'll go sell it in red states and live in those red states where we don't have to worry about crime. There's whole like teams of people that go like to New York to steal expensive stuff and then back to Florida to sell it. So to tell all those people, okay, we're not gonna do any kind of police enforcement this time to this time, and we're not gonna answer calls for harassment or burglary at all, is it's ringing the dinner bell for those people is what's happening.
it's just mind blowing to me. I like, but again, how do you course correct from that? You know, you already have the military is like can't recruit people into it. And I would argue the military already has they both kind of have negative connotations, but I think the average man is more inclined to be willing to join, you know, any military branch than they would be inclined to join the police force. And so if the military is struggling with getting recruitment numbers in and they already have to like lower all their standards, then like, man, well, you're just gonna have to accept anybody who walks into Pittsburgh and wants to be a cop at this point because I don't see any other way around it. It's going to require legislation changing on like what the standards would be. I just, man, and my heart goes out to anybody who's in Pittsburgh because we know we're going to see some terrible things in the coming weeks when this happens.
Yeah, well, let's also be realistic though. That wasn't an accident. It was there was a lot of work put in from specifically the Democrat Party to destroy the profession of policing, with to fund the police. And then as far as the military goes, they're putting out recruiting ads with drag queens to get you to join the Navy. You're telling me they thought that would up recruitment? No, they knew that would get the people that they wanted there to not want to be there. So I mean, it's not by accident that those policemen and those military service members aren't going to be able to help you. It was very much on purpose, and there was a lot of work put into it, I think.
And I agree. I mean, if I can imagine though that there's going to be multiple cities doing the same thing. And I mean, we have another story from Houston that we'll get to in a bit, but I just can see like Chicago adapting the same thing, right? From like 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. They install the same kind of blue box, you know, call station, and who knows what other cities. I'd imagine California is another rife one, like San Francisco, the Bay Area, places of that nature. Like, and they announce
All
it.
of California, New
Yeah,
York, Chicago, these Democrat strongholds are big, well-populated cities where they've defunded the police. They've damaged recruitment for the military. They've tried to limit the amount of guns that their citizens can have. And now they're ringing the dinner bells saying, hey, criminals, you know, this is where you can get away with doing pretty much whatever you want. And these are the specific times that you should do it in.
so I honestly, I think I'm inclined to agree with you. Like, I think it's intentional. Like, to have an announcement on this level is like you are seriously like, you know, you're calling the sharks, man. You're like, come here, come hither, and it's crazy because you had said like they're feeding the people into the wolves. How would I mean? Are we going to see a riot overnight in these places? Do you think there's even enough conservative surge in a place like Pittsburgh to change something like this? Like if I was them, I'd be like, there's no way, dude. But maybe I would imagine though, in that area, neighborhood watches and like maybe small third party militia groups have already been like, okay, like we're gonna have to carry the buck. And imagine things
In
like that.
California, you think there's a lot of those small
No.
party militia groups that are armed and willing to patrol and secure neighborhoods?
Not in California. I was thinking Pittsburgh. But that's the other thing though too, is if it's
Pittsburgh, maybe.
well,
You know, it is steel country. There's hard class working people there. Possibly. I don't personally know a lot about the gun laws in their area, but I bet they're probably pretty strict just because, again,
mhm.
Democrat stronghold. So
Let me look that up actually.
hopefully, I mean, I'm
What
hoping
are
for them.
I mean, same. And the reason I say this too, my heart goes out for him, is I think I told Donnie this off air right before we went on, is like my wife was like trying to go to bed. So I'll give her that. But I was trying to tell her, like, dude, like you won't believe this crazy story. And she's like, why are you telling me? Why are you trying to make me sad? And I'm like, okay, you're right. Because it's just, everybody knows the outcome of this. We're going to see some kind of insane story in the next coming days where it was like this person robbed like 14 houses in a row. And no matter how many police reports came in, like, well, you're not going to stop the dude, especially if it's like out of state people, like what you had said, especially if like I was already planning on doing some kind of crazy stuff. And then two, that makes me think like if all of like, you know, any kind of drug deal or anything like that is now going to be taking place during the hours of 3 a.m. and 7, like people are going to start planning for it now, being like, okay, dude, like I'll come pick up that QP at, you know, around 3:30 a.m. because they know there ain't a thing going to happen to them. But I wanted to pull up and look at what the license to carry. Okay, so people in Pennsylvania can apply at 21 years or older concealed carry. So it looks like they don't have constitutional carry yet, but they at least still operate under the
They
CCW
can
laws.
apply. Okay. But the real question is, you know,
Yeah,
because in New York City, you can apply,
that's right. What is it?
but
The
the
shall issue
real
versus will issue?
situation is, yeah. I mean, the real situation is you can apply in New York City, but unless you're a judge or a police officer or something like that, you're almost definitely going to
Yeah.
get declined.
Well, then that's the same way that it
So
operates in Jersey too. Like if you can't prove
yeah,
that you,
a lot of their cities operate that way because they're fine with them protecting themselves. It's you they don't want protecting yourself. But again, they can apply versus, you know, 60% of people getting approved is a lot different than maybe they can apply and maybe 12% of people get approved. And those people are police officers and judges and, you know, other protected positions.
right? Because they will protect their own. And let this be a reminder, dude. Like they hate you. Like these people hate you. I don't know how it can get any more clearer than them installing, you know, a first round wave of a purge for people to finally get the idea that like your interests are not at all cared for, let alone are they represented, dude. Like it's straight like they don't care who you are, dude. You will suffer. And it's, you know, and again, like Donnie had said, like intentionally defunding the police, these these grassroots movements, causing people to just shy away from it. You go with the negative connotation of being an officer. Nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants to put themselves on the line like that. And then you think too, even if you do a good job, you're still going to have a huge sect of people who hate you no matter what you do because you're a cop. And it's like, it's just one of those things where it's like, you got to be really rugged as an individual and they're like, honestly, not care or be entirely principled to move into those places. And maybe this is, I'm hoping it's not a trend, but the reality is that this very well could be a trend and we could see all of these other blue strongholds being like, yep, we're doing this too. Yep, we're doing this too. Go ahead, Donnie.
Well, and you told them they should leave, which is a fair warning. But you also have to remember that the same people that weaken their police forces and their National Guard and the military also artificially inflated the economy and robbed them of their savings. So I'm guessing that a lot of those people are stuck there unless they are, you know, ultra wealthy. So
Yeah.
the working class people there, the people we're hoping are going to be, you know, okay, make it through this, they probably don't have the means anymore after surviving Biden's economy to just leave or find a new place to live.
Yeah. No, and I mean, especially when you put it like that, like I would imagine if Columbus, was to install some kind of, thing like that, like there's no way. I wouldn't like. I mean, I could probably go out to live with my parents for the meantime. That's a good distance away, and maybe that's honestly the best advice. Is like if you do have someone that you can go stay with, and avoid it as much as possible. It's probably the best advice you're gonna get because this is gonna be something that ain't gonna change overnight. It's clear that they've been planning to install this along with an AI directory with a phone call for police reporting. Like, good luck, good luck,
These
Pittsburgh.
cities are big rat traps for people. Right? Those people are now stuck there. They have no way to defend themselves. And even the people that do have the way to defend themselves are probably, again, mostly cops and judges and things like that. And the people that need to get out of there probably don't have the means anymore. And there are people that would say, they voted for this, they deserve it. Not everybody there voted for this,
Right.
even if they vote overwhelmingly one way. And I don't think we should abandon those people. But this is another reason I push the message of vote in your own interests
Yeah.
on the show as often as I can say it, because these are people that are voting in interest for others, saying, oh, we should control guns because the horrible things sometimes happen, or these people are voting for their own demise, but they're doing it in somebody else's interests, and they don't know that person.
And let's be real clear about this. Like the only group that has a notable statistically significant outgroup preference is white people, and specifically white liberals. This is where it's you see these markers where it's like female white female girls vote liberal at like 70%, and then like the men the difference is huge. But you take into the fact too of like voting an outgroup preference. Whites are the only group in America out of all of the minority groups that has a statistically significant outgroup preference. And now you get to reap the rewards of following through with voting in virtue rather than an interest of what that turns to be. So when you echo all of these sentiments of like, you want to defund the police without having a whiff of an idea of what that may look like, just because, oh, cop's bad, cop racist, he hurt black people. This is what you get, and this is really, I talk about this all the time. People have literally most people, I don't want to say all people, a lot of people have literally zero clue what a second level or third level consequence is, because they just simply cannot think that deeply about an issue beyond what is being presented at the shallow, surface level. And so that's when you get a lot of people who can, on the surface go, oh yeah, no, like we should defund cops because I just see cops hurting people all the time. And it goes back to, my number go up, good. And it's like, okay, cop hurt people, less cop, good. And it's this basic, poorly thought through. And again, like when your votes already don't count for much at all anyways, when representatives who you do vote in will constantly shirk their duty and spit in the constituents' face who voted them in, it's like you better be really sure what you do when you spend that one vote that you do have.
Yeah, but so those people should think about their positions more. We talk about why they don't. A lot of people just don't want to or have time to deal with this shit,
Right.
or they don't have the emotional stability to like work with it, accept the information, and move on. And I think those people need to do more work with their research, but you're also forgetting how much work was put into convincing those people that police were the bad guy, right?
Yeah.
Like all these videos of police hurting people or things like that, when it's not justified, they blow it up and they make it a huge thing. Even sometimes when it is justified, they convince you that it wasn't and blow it up and make it a huge thing. So I mean, it's not just these people need to think more. I mean, obviously they do, but they're also under attack, and the attack isn't physical, it's emotional. And that's what's getting them to do things like attack their own interests, and defund the people that are protecting them.
And that's the unfortunate part. You bring up the emotionality of it. Like almost all leftist or progressive arguments are operant in pathos. Like they try to strike at the emotional strings of an argument, generally, which is like, don't you feel bad this is happening? How could you not feel bad this is happening? Like, feel bad. And that's when you get people who then it turns into those who don't normally or don't actually organically feel bad. They artificially feel bad with the virtue signal. But what I will say, though, is like people do need to pay more attention. I agree with you on the fact that it's like there is a clear concerted effort, a conspiracy, if you will, to ensure that these things take place. But I also go back to my default, which is vigilance is the price of freedom. And I understand that, you know, what's that tried old saying, you know, Satan works hard, but God works harder. It's like you have to make sure that you are always outworking evil. And I understand that when it's at this level, like the economy's in the tanker, you have to work. Most people got to work over 48 hours a week or hold 2 different jobs just to ensure that they can stay somewhat level of financially stable. I get the argument now where it becomes, okay, but these people don't even have enough time to equip themselves with the knowledge to combat these things. So then what's the solution then? Like, what would you then argue, Donnie? What would be the solution to kind of bridge that gap then?
Yeah, so this is why I'm a radical centrist, right? We need to stop giving the government powers to fix these things and start removing the government's power to stop destroying us. You know, those policies in those cities are about to have some very real consequences.
Yep.
These aren't the first consequences, but this is, I mean, this is open season on innocent people that live in these areas. They have gone from being emotionally under attack and politically under attack to they're about to be physically under attack.
Yeah.
It seems. And it's very sad. And I know me and you, great, we argue to a lot of people, you know, you probably should own a gun and protect yourself. But we all have grandmothers that will never do that. And
Yep.
those people need protectors. And not only are the protectors now gone, but it was announced that they were gone. So everybody knows. I know, you know, the criminals in the area know, okay, we can go to this place, and during this time we have free reign of this city.
And then,
Very sad.
yeah, it's definitely sad. And you make the best point with the grandmother, right? Like, I think the moment you said that, a lot of people sat here and are like, okay, yeah, like my mom, or like someone's thinking like, oh yeah, my old grandpa, and like maybe he would want to, but maybe some people's grandfathers just aren't even that mobile to defend themselves in that right, even if it is with the gun. And so, you know, it draws back to the fact of the Second Amendment in its entirety outright, which also includes militias. I think then it just sucks because we're not getting any kind of time to transition the culture. So with that being said, like there will be people who suffer real world consequences because they were not paying attention or they weren't adapted for what was coming to them. And again, that's, you know, whether they were paying attention or not, outside of that, it's still no justification for an innocent person to suffer some kind of violence or some kind of harm. And it just makes me think like, too, it's more than owning a gun. It's the fact of, you know, there needs to be like a brotherhood, you know, the community caring for one another. But when you lack that, it kind of does atomize it down to this small portion of like, you better hope that there's a gun in every one of your homes. Or if you do know you have a grandmother who won't do that, like maybe you start adapting to the fact that you spend your nights there, you know, as long as they're within distance or such. But, you know, there's not, because my goal or hope would be that the culture was so acclimated with the fact that the government hates them and is evil, that it just would go without question that everybody has a gun. Oh, I got a gun in my glove box. I got a gun in my mattress. There's a gun in my pillowcase over there. But it's not there yet. And so with that being said, I think that, and hopefully if something dark enough happens during this period of the purge, maybe the culture shifts just like that. And people are like, okay, we are owning guns tomorrow.
I mean, I think we're maybe letting people off a little easy if we say we just didn't have time to change the culture. I mean, I've talked about Yuri Bezmenov telling us about this in the 80s.
Yeah.
We had plenty of time. People didn't pay attention. They didn't believe it. They gave more power to government over the years, and here we are at the climax of what seems to be a very serious situation. So I mean, we had time. We didn't do anything.
Well, that's
Most
why
people didn't even believe it, or there's a fair amount of people that have probably never heard of Yuri.
well, exactly. But that's why I put forward the argument of like vigilance is the price of freedom. Like it's just like you just literally have to pay attention. But you also got to like that ties into the fact of like that comes with the belief and understanding that like we live in an evil world. Like we live in a world where there are literal people who worship Satan. This is the matter of fact. But as you said it, like people don't even want to believe it. So it's like how do you stretch these concepts to people who actively shirk their responsibilities and civic duties at the detriment of their community, at the detriment of their family? Like you're right, I don't want to let these people off too easy, but at the same time, as it's like I want to be a well-meaning hammer, but I don't want to hammer it down to the point that somebody's like, oh, F this guy, like, and that's not going to happen. Our community's fine. But then boom. And then your door gets kicked in and you're going to be thinking about that guy who yelled at you to go buy a gun, but it's going to be too late. And the next thing you know, you're going to hear and see a flash and it's done. And that's unfortunate. I don't want that to happen to people, but it's going to. It literally is going to.
It absolutely is going to, for sure. I mean, as far as what I think we could do, we could start by like not voting for it. That's a good start. Like if we can convince these people, which there's no way that people that live in those areas that saw this announcement are feeling good about it, right? Like
Right.
even if you were like, my community's fine, like I live in a place where my community is largely fine. Like in on the day to day, I don't have any interaction or need for police. But occasionally, it pops up. I'm glad they're there, and I'm glad my neighbors have the ability to call them if they need them. And I don't think very many people actually feel better when they're gone. You know who definitely feels better when they're gone? Criminals. Criminals love when there are no cops around. And as a former, I'd like to add nonviolent criminal. I didn't want to see cops, ever.
Yep.
So those are the people that are really pumped about having no police. I think everybody else is probably getting a pretty rude wake up call right now.
I think there still might be a portion of people who are like, don't even care. There's probably a portion of people who like can't even see the consequences of this, what this may be. They're probably reading all these purge posts being like, what do you mean? You can still go to the police box. It's not like they're getting rid of any kind of police contact. And it's like, okay, well, man, when you're getting stabbed as you're like trying to hang on to that blue phone box because you can't protect yourself. Like, I don't think it's really going to save your life. Like, yeah, you were able to file a report, man, but that blue box ain't going to turn into a transformer and defend you.
Up the mess.
Exactly. But maybe that's what's easier for them to do with only 140 people. And let me say this too. Let me bring this next one up. For people who don't believe that this is like honestly a widespread problem, I have this thing, News Nation, it went viral. I'm going to make sure this video doesn't play automatically. But Houston, and I saw this before I saw the Purge, the clip of the Purge. Let me pull my screen up here. Forgive the fake Dolly Parton looking advertisement right there. Houston police suspended 264,000 investigations over a lack of personnel. Now the number seems big, but it was over 8 years. However, I think that's even a bit more incorrect because I think, does it say it down here? It doesn't. If you separate that up, I think the majority of these were in the last 2 or 3 years, leaving about only 50,000 to fill out the rest of those 8 years. So they're kind of trying to, cover their ass a little bit with that. And they say the cases were suspended under a lack of personnel code, meaning like in the system, they will just suspend the entire, forgive me, investigation and follow-ups with some kind of code they instituted in Houston, which just means like unavailable or like not enough people. So it becomes a cold case at that point, and it looks like they're not checking into it. And of these cases, that there's 4,000 adult sex crime reports, which would extend anything from sexual harassment, sexual assault, and rape. Then you have 109,000 major assault cases and 6,500 homicide cases that have been suspended, meaning that there are 6,500 individuals who are waiting on pending justice just in one city in one state of Texas. This is going to probably really, really, really quickly change the culture of this country. I don't see, and I posted this with the fact of like, I imagine a lot of these are occurring because of the border crisis problem, and maybe a lot of these suspensions are the fact of you want to kind of help fudge the numbers so you don't see a huge rise of illegal immigrant or criminal alien, homicide cases or sexual assault cases. So there could be a bit of that in there too. We had just talked about how these people plan these things like they conspire because they hate you. So I can only imagine that there's a little bit of that involved. And we haven't even talked about New York, but even this has an addendum in the articles talking about the fact that the National Guard is being deployed to check bags and be security for the New York subway. So it's not just the blue strongholds. Well, I would imagine Houston probably does vote blue. Forgive me, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but it's Texas, so it's a red state. So you'd imagine the culture there would be a bit different. But it seems like, dude, that defund the police campaign has done an absolute number to the recruitment ability to policing as a whole. And let me just tell you, like we've been saying, like this only affects the working class people because anyone who's got enough money to defend themselves will. And you got to think too, why was Mark Zuckerberg building a bunker? Why was Rick Ross building a bunker? Why were all of these other huge athletes and like famous figures in the last year or two building bunkers? Well, I can bet that they didn't see the writing on the wall, but because these people all have these incestuous relationships with the media and they protect themselves because the elite will do that, they probably had been tipped by some kind of official letting them know, hey, if you live in this area, like you're probably going to start seeing Purge-like activities. You better build a bunker like they advertised in the first Purge. And it's just gross, man. But I want to let you go ahead, man. If you feel any differently.
So, I think you're forgetting that Texas isn't just Texas anymore, right? Because after these people's voting destroyed California, where'd they all go?
Yeah.
They all
Austin.
went to Texas.
Yep.
And they're all voting the same way, right? They went to Austin, they went to Houston, and that's where they'll start. And then, eventually they'll flip Texas blue if this is like allowed to continue like this. So, I mean, you're right. Texas is, the reddest of the red, or it was, but it isn't just normal Texas anymore. Half of it's California.
And the crazy thing that I cannot understand is how can you not make that connection? That it was the policies that you instituted yourself, that you voted for, that you advocated for, that you were an activist for, is the reason why you're now in Texas in an entirely different state. And to see them, like you had just said, voting the same exact way, like I believe it was Austin was like the biggest city that had the import of Californians. And they immediately start having issues. Yeah, because they bring in their policies with them because these people live in a cult. And it makes me think, like, who would you blame? Who are they blaming for the problems that they faced in California while they had to flee? It's like the people want to point to Gavin Newsom, but it's like Gavin Newsom is simply a vessel of your voting, of your policies you put forward. He's allowed to exist because there are so many activists who echo these sentiments from these like highly progressive, highly leftist policies. And I tell you what, it's hard for me to feel bad, but I also do understand that there are innocent people who will be harmed and be touched from these processes.
Well, you're also thinking of these people as they are political beings, right? Because they're going out and they're voting. So you think of them as political beings like you or I, but they largely aren't. These are largely people that before Trump ran for president were the kind of people that said, I'm not political. I don't really care about any of that stuff. That's who these people are. They're not political beings. They're brainwashed cultists. That before Orange Man Bad came up, they didn't want to talk about politics. They didn't care about politics. I largely think they don't care about politics. Even the people out marching with political signs and voting, I don't think they really care about politics, but they do get a sense of belonging for having the right opinion and being in the in group. And I think that's why they can see their own areas, their own homes destroyed, and move to another place and vote for those things. It's because they aren't political beings that they can do that.
And it's crazy because, like, yeah, they're not political beings, but because every social institution, and that's why it's like why you have to win some of these institutions back too. It's because, like, you're right, like they're not largely political. So with that being said, this goes back and speaks to the things of like the Taylor, like the Swifties, and the college education, and any other place that's not a political news source that they get politics from, are probably the reason why they're carrying these tenets while not being political beings, because it's being reinforced by nearly every other, large figure, large account that's not already been deemed a MAGA account or a MAGA person. And it's just sad because, again, it's just, I don't get how they've turned people to be these walking robots. I understand it in theory and hypothetical. I guess I can't stretch it to even put it in my shoes because I've been so aware of a lot of these different things. So I struggle with even feeling bad for these people because it's just like, dude, at a certain point, like, you have to get it. And I would hope that it doesn't take you literally being mugged at gunpoint for you to understand something. But again, you also have people who are like, I had to do 18 years of porn before I realized it was wrong. And it's like, come on, man. Like, I don't buy that for a second, dude. It's just like, you're just a bad person. Like, and then it was like, maybe you hit a wall. But go ahead, my bad.
I was just gonna say before like maybe 2015, that was the norm. Most people didn't care about politics. Like, both of us, I mean, we've talked a little bit, both of us got into politics young through like our dads, and then like, me specifically, and through all other cultures like punk music, which has always inherently been political. But like, we were the rare instances, right?
Yeah.
Before it's politics are like sports for nerds, and
Yeah.
most people aren't interested in that, right? Like,
Yep.
and that was the norm. But now, of these people that were never interested are told you have to have an opinion, and now you have to pick a side, and there is a right answer here. Those people, I mean, people have always kind of been a little bit robotic like that. Like, being my age and having kids and having to meet their dads, you have no idea how many guys I meet that they think they're just so smart because they know who coaches for some obscure football college team, or they've memorized all these stats and stuff for like these things that just don't matter. So I mean, people have always been a little bit robotic and a little bit tribal, and I think the people in charge have really been able to take advantage of that. And that's why most people that didn't have an opinion do. They were told they had to.
And I think, well, that goes back to like bread and circuses. The whole thing with the Coliseum, right? Like, they give these people bread and give them circuses, and they'll not care about anything else. And so okay. So you put it that way, then it's like, then maybe the blame's not on the individual. The blame is on the parents and the generations who, at whatever point, whatever time that may have occurred. Because, I mean, in 1776, I would imagine that a lot of people were very political, right? Like, people were very well aware of what was going on. Not a lot of them. And even with that being said, it was like a third of the country was even, involved in the revolutionary, or in being revolutionaries. And even fewer actually took part in actual physical conflict. But it still goes to the fact of, there has been long instituted processes such as bread and circuses that have been continually used to essentially, kind of subjugate a population into caring about things that don't really matter. while also avoiding and shirking everything that does. So again, you say it that way with the bread and circus aspect because, this random dude can tell you like 25 of the top 25 college football coaches. It's like, what really good is that compared to knowing you're the 25 reps from your own state? And none of these guys can do that. Like they literally just can't. Like most people can't even name one rep of their own state because they're that far disconnected from politics. And it's disheartening because it's a very far shot away from where the culture should be. And until we can kind of correct for the fact that people are going to constantly give in to being infatuated with basic entertainment. I mean, this speaks to things, even from the Christian perspective of idolatry, like how many men, have spent more time watching a football game or NFL highlights through the week than they've been reading the Bible or going to church or even with their own family. Like how many men even like spend, 7 hours a week one-on-one with their daughter or son, but consume 7 hours throughout the week of sports entertainment. It's like, I'd argue that's probably the majority of them. And again, like I'm the same as you, like, I still like sports. Don't get me wrong. I turn on a football game and I enjoy it. My favorite team is the Chargers. But even I know that doesn't take priority in terms of like what to pay attention to over, politics, over like the inner workings of the day-to-days, the keeping, an eye on your government. And it's just sad because these things happen now because it's like what you had said, like we're the rare ones. So now when you only have like 6% of people actively every day making sure or watching or paying attention and the other 94 don't, you get these points, you get this dichotomy where you can easily be written off as a conspiracy theorist because you have to battle consensus. But the consensus is drawn by the fact that every institution is also holding these BS policies. They're also all holding this, this occult-like wokeism. And so it makes it nearly impossible to navigate. And this is also, we're watching into a bunch of different subjects, especially with the NFL stuff, because that's also part of like the feminization of men. Like these men will go and pay tickets to go to these football games more than they would ever protest transgender surgery on children or minors. And that's crazy to me. Like I can't connect the two. I can't bring myself to be in the position of someone who's like, oh man, but like, what am I going to do about it? It was like, well, you can at least pay attention. You can at least understand what's happening. My gosh, dude, if somebody sat there and was like, man, dude, you see we got 20 million illegals in? Well, what am I going to do about it? Turns on game. What?
Yeah, I'm a little different. I don't watch any of that shit. I don't watch football. I don't watch baseball. I like combat sports. I watch it occasionally. But other than that, I don't partake. But it's like the go-to guy thing to talk about still. Like, anytime I'm, kids have play dates, you got to talk to some schlub that, the first thing he says to you is, how about them Red Sox? And, I got to be like, oh, fuck, now we got to talk about this now. You know what I mean? I don't know anything. I don't care. I'm far more fascinated with how the world actually works. And I think politics is at least the surface level of that. So, I mean, I've always kind of been fascinated in that and other things that, kind of help you understand humanity as a whole, like religion and philosophy. But there's so many people that are just content knowing a lot about their favorite thing. And for a lot of guys, that just happens to be sports. You know what I mean? So do I blame those guys? No, but do I want to spend time with them? Absolutely not.
No, right. The thing is, like, or I differ is like, I do blame these guys. I like, maybe not directly, maybe indirectly, like, then I blame their father. Like, somewhere along the line in your bloodline, the father was like, you know what? I'm going to not instill these values in my son. And that's the person who I would hold the most conviction against, which is like, at somewhere along these lines, the guy was like, you know what? Nothing bad will ever happen again. Like, we reached the peak of society. All right, son. Like, let's just care about all of these things and nothing about anything that may matter. And that's just, again, I can't stretch it because my father, hammered it into me like these things matter a lot more than anything else. And again, that also is because I come from a position where like I don't value material things, so it's probably why I can easily like turn off an NFL game and like listen to Tim Pool rant for 3 minutes and get angry about it. Most people in the room would be like, dude, what do you do in the game? And I'm like, bro, listen to this. Like, listen to what this stupid guy said. And because I'm just wired like that. Like, and then I guess, yeah, I go ahead, my bad.
I want to just kind of jump in though, because I want to try and help you understand these people, right? Because I think there's maybe a little bit of inconsistency because you just said like, how much of them spend, how much of people are spending, 7 hours with their kids. But that's how these guys ended up that way, right? Their dad took them to a ball game, or that's how they connected with their dad. Like we got into politics, that's what our dads were into, but like they got into football because that's what made dad proud. You know what I mean? So like even when the people maybe don't think the way that you'd like them to, like they're not paying attention to the things that we'd really like them to, there's probably a reason for that. It's probably not an inherently bad reason. I don't think football is inherently bad. It's just the people that they're just happy knowing just that thing, that one thing. Like I know every word to Taylor Swift songs and I paid $1,000 for a ticket. They're happy.
Nasty.
They know that. But they don't know anything else.
I get it, but it's like, but why though? Like I don't blame them for being, what's the word? Like debutante. But at the same time, like there's a purge in Pittsburgh, like someone has got to start caring, like maybe not to the degree of you and I, but like, man, you've got to at least align your priorities somewhat. Because listen, what I'll tell you is this, like I always knew growing up, the dynamic between most fathers and their sons was a lot different than the dynamic that I had with my father. Mainly saying where I felt like a lot of dads didn't care about their kids. That was the general impression I got a lot of the times, whether I'm staying the night at my friend's house or I'm doing this, and not all of them. Because especially Thane's dad. Let me bring Thane's dad in there because Thane's dad really does care. But a lot of other ones, it was clear to me where it was like, wait, your dad doesn't care if you do this? Why? Like, I don't even want to do that, and things of that nature where it became clear that I was getting a very, very, very macro imaging of what there was to go on in the world. And it was very structured for me because my dad put the time in to talk me through these things. And then when you see that there's an absolute non-existence of it, it's like, it's not even a grayscale. It's like, a little bit. No, it's like literally just non-existent. So it's like, if we can just get them to meet somewhere in the middle, like, try to watch the news once a week, like, anything of that nature, give it an hour or do a challenge where it's like, find a creator you like and just follow them. Just listen to somebody, dude. Instead of always turning on Stephen A. Smith complaining about white people while the Cowboys lose in the playoffs once again. It's like, it's bread and circuses, dude. Especially when you combine all the recent stuff with like people thinking it's rigged and things like that. Like that's turned me off to football. I don't even care about my fantasy league because I'm like, dude, it's rigged. It's scripted. They're drawing up this stuff like in the year before in the off-season meetings. Like, I don't care about this stuff, dude. Especially when like, I think of it from the fact of like, a lot of these people don't have voices. Like a lot of these kids and like people who end up getting trafficked, people who do end up getting like violent crimes committed against them in these places. Like I can't abandon them. I can't not sit here and yell for their sakes because I know like very few people are willing to pay attention. Very few people are willing to take the heat for speaking the incorrect opinion. And I guess that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like there are some people that have a voice and use it, and I feel like most people probably are scared or don't want the hassle of actually going out and doing it, or like people we've talked about that just don't have the right priorities because their dad was more focused on sports than politics, or they didn't have an NPR grandpa like I did. you know, uh, I gave you a piece of advice about like children that I was given about how we're all just kids raising kids.
Yeah.
So like, can I blame them or their dads for, connecting with them over a football game? No, but I do beg those people to please start paying attention to something else, at least for a little bit, because we need those people to be in this fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And maybe that's what it is. It's incumbent upon the people like you and I to like not be annoying, but like always try to be there to be like, hey, did you see this? Hey, did you see this? And it's like, I don't care if anybody wants to paint me as like, oh, that's that politics guy. Like, avoid talking with that guy. Like, I don't care. And, because at some point, maybe somebody is like, oh, no, I didn't see that. And then you could be the person who entirely changes their perspective on something. And that's generally how a lot of conversations happen at my last workplace, because I'm like, I'm doing this as a server. So I'm talking to a lot of people, especially between bartending and serving. So not only was I like amongst my own coworkers, when I was bartending, dude, I was be having these conversations with the people at the bar. And what was crazy was it was the same way what I just talked about before, which there's no grayscale with this. There's no gradient. The conversations would either be someone would be like, I'd be like, oh, hey, did you see like Obama wishes that he was the puppet master and like Biden would be a perfect person for that? Did you see that video clip? And the guy goes, oh man, let me tell you about Mike. And then, or the person goes like, oh, yeah, Obama was a good president. And then like they just like shy away because like then that's the grayscale. It's black or white. These people are either tuned in or they're tuned out. And I think for most people, once you begin that tune in, where you find a thread that interests you and you begin to like unravel it, you're going to end up as me and Donnie, right? Especially if you do have the curiosity killed the cat kind of level inside of you, where you're like, okay, but this, what happened to this? Wait a minute, this person, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute. And that's how it felt for me. That's how it's essentially been my entire life. You just connect the dots from one thing to the next and you go, okay, wait a minute. But the only way you can do that is with a time over a long enough period while being consistently paying attention to the news stories. Because if you just jump in and jump out, you miss so much. You miss a lot of the connections. But then when you're in the news all the time, it becomes a lot easier to see the parallels and congruencies when stories connect to one another.
But you're saying those people should turn on the news, right? You're forgetting the people that are saying, well, Obama's a pretty good president. Those were the people that had the news on, right? Mm-hmm. Because to them, media doesn't say anything equals no scandal, right?
Yeah.
They think he had a scandal-proof presidency despite, drone killing more people than any other president, and like bombing children, and he was just as strict on immigration at the time. Like, those things weren't reported, so those people that think he's a good president aren't even the people we're necessarily talking about, that are just happy to know football numbers and Taylor Swift songs. Those are the people that we're trying to know, and they went to try and figure it out. And they went to MSNBC, and they went to, these other news networks, CNN, and they were lied to by those new news networks. And that's how people that don't understand new media got this information, was they went to those places so they can see those places. Well, they didn't report on bad things for Obama, and they reported on bad things for Trump, so Trump must be worse than Obama.
Listen, I will entirely
fooled.
I stand corrected. I can't believe I did not hear myself. Do not. Yeah, you're totally right. Like, don't even watch the news. The news is worthless. Journalists are fucking garbage. I guess the better thing to say would be follow me or follow like Tim Pool, or follow Candace Owens, follow Benny Johnson, follow someone who you view as like a good independent creator. Ian Carroll, for all that matters, like, and TikTok guy. Because everything that Donnie said is true. Like the news is honestly no different than any other one of these institutions that is beating the same tune to the same war drum that's leading these people down the line into being slaughtered, literally, or at least harmed, in more ways than one, and most definitely probably physically. But that's the thing. It's like, yeah, the new news, not the old news, the new news, and everybody knows that it's becoming. Michael Carlson running his new show, Alex Jones operating on his own. X is becoming the big platform where all these independent guys are putting their claim out. I mean, people are still trying to do it on YouTube, but YouTube's still big techie and they censor and clamp down on things. But it doesn't mean you still can't get some points across here. So yeah, I will stand 100% corrected on that.
I want to touch on one other thing you said, where you said, like, you're not worried about being known as that, the political guy. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not divisive. It's not the first thing I talk about, but like, if I'm at a party and somebody starts talking politics, they almost instantly will be delivered to me. Somebody will say, "Oh, I know a guy that you should talk to." And that's good, because those people should talk to me.
Yeah.
And I find that you should be known like that, right? Like, your friends should know that if somebody starts saying some crazy shit, that they should talk to you, because you're the guy that can set them straight.
Yeah.
And even if you don't have Tim Pool's reach, you should be that guy. Even if you're not like us, where we're okay talking and showing our face on camera, you should be that guy in your circles that people can be like, "Oh, you should talk to this guy about this. He might know some stuff that you don't know."
Oh, 100%. The only reason I said that was because, like, in a work setting, because I talked about bartending and serving, and I understand that a lot of people they may feel pressure from their bosses to not be political at work. I mean, I literally had an interview earlier today where they said they didn't have a culture of politics. But yeah, right.
Even as somebody that's always been political, there are things I don't talk about at work. I don't talk about religion. I don't talk about politics. It's not the place for it. I do my job. I talk about what I'm paid to talk about. I don't think there's anything wrong with keeping politics out of your job, even before there was like a fear where people were afraid of losing their jobs for their opinion. Even back before that fear existed, I didn't think it was something you should talk about at your job. Like, it's one of those things, religion, money, politics, those things can be divisive in the workplace, and it's a distraction.
Well, let me ask you then, because I know you do work remote. How much, like, I guess, casual conversations do you have with, like, coworkers?
About politics?
Well, I mean, just in general, like about anything, like small talk even.
Oh, small talk. We have points where we are almost forced to do that kind of stuff, where
Okay.
It's kind of like team building stuff where we're just scheduled time to like go, shoot the shit. But that I wouldn't talk about politics with coworkers on company time unless well, not on company time, but like I talk to those people if they're also my friends. But I do that outside of work, not on the clock.
Because that was what I was gonna say. Was that's how it went with me and Wayne. Was like our relationship strengthened because we were nonstop talking about, like, bro, did you see this? Bro, did you see this? And we're talking about Christianity at work too. And he bore that cross a lot more for Christianity than I did. I was more the politics guy side of it. And I was only saying that, I guess, because, when it wasn't just me and Wayne, like, maybe serving is just different because you're constantly around each other, and it's more so like
kitchen work is different in general. Like when I was I worked in the restaurant industry a long time. I was a chef though, back of house, so I could talk about whatever I wanted there. Generally, would I talk about politics a lot? Occasionally. That's a little different than kind of corporate company jobs, things like that. You have a lot of time. You're just sitting there, you're cooking. You have to either talk about what's happening so you can communicate the job.
Yeah.
Or you have off time where you're all just kind of hanging out, But I don't do that kind of, same with construction, really. You do a lot of that where you're just like, well, boss hasn't shown up with the tools and he's late again, so we're just gonna sit here and hang out and talk. But I think there's certain industries maybe where, hanging out and talking politics on company time probably isn't a big deal, I guess. But there are just certain things that, like, I was just taught about, you don't talk about in good company or at work or things like that.
Yeah,
Like, I'm not believe it or not, I'm not the first guy at the Thanksgiving dinner table to turn into politics. I don't like to be that guy.
really. I see. I
But I do
am.
think that
I think I might just be more aggressive though.
no, because everybody knows that they can come talk to me about it already, right? Like, and they know that if they want my opinion, that I'll give it to them. But like, am I gonna just force it on them every time I see them? No, because then you become insufferable, and people don't want to listen to you anymore, and then you're just forcing them to listen to you.
Right.
I think of it more like a sales tactic than like trying to avoid the subject, right? Like, I'm trying to get them to come to me and know that I'm here if they have questions, but not necessarily forcing it on them to the point where they become resentful of my advice.
Okay, so let me ask you this then, because I think the general way I approach these situations is I literally go like, "Oh hey, like, did you see that thing with we'll use this one for example. Did you see that Pittsburgh's not deploying police officers between the hours of 3 a.m. and 7 a.m.?" Like, that's generally like how I'll kind of broach a conversation where I ask if they've seen the news piece, where I'm not even injecting a bias into it. I'm just asking if they've seen it. And if they say no, that's when I take it to like, okay, well, let me tell you. Or if they say yes, then I kind of gauge like what they think of it in that instance. And then from there, I'll choose how I'm going to move forward in that conversation. Because again, like, I'm just, I am just an aggressive personality. And I always hold that stance of like I believe I'm right. So like, I'm gonna probably talk to you like, from that, with that confidence too. But I don't know. I guess I just see it as more so like when it's gotten to this level, like, in 2016, like, no, like, I wasn't the guy asking about, if all these people had saw, did you see them lying about the Orange Man? Did you see him? I wasn't like that at all. But now when it's at the rate that it's at now, when it's like, did you see that Vanderbilt was performing gender sex changes under the age of 16? Or did you see, the purge is happening? Now I'm at the point now where I'm like, I feel a bit more Paul Revere-in, where it's like, I'm going to try to get these things out to people. Just because it's like the gravity of the situation, I feel, has drastically worsened compared to what we were looking at in 2016.
Oh, maybe. My family time is precious to me, and as much as I do think people need to wake up to this stuff, I'm not going to ruin Thanksgiving to talk to people that either already know what's going on or are totally oblivious and never going to care.
Yeah.
So that's for me, like, I guess there's a right time and a right place, right? Like, Thanksgiving's not the right place. When I'm working at my job and, small chatting with my coworkers, it's generally not the right place. But if those people come to me, in their free time and they ask me a question, that's when you can really do some work.
Yeah. No, I can agree with that. Yeah, I don't think it's every time you need to be going up to somebody.
You
and
also
saying
have to
something.
remember, I abstained from all social media as long as I could. And to this day, I never had a Facebook or I'm like pretty much brand new to this Twitter shit. So like, I didn't, like, we all had that crazy uncle that was all, driving everybody away on Facebook with just constant political barrages.
You
Like, so like, I watched those divides happen in my family, and like, you have to understand that it's a divisive topic, and if you push it on people 24/7, eventually they're going to think you're a crazy person, or they will no longer heed your advice because you forced it on them, right? It's like, me and my brother and my sister were all very much forced into Catholicism. We all resented it. It drove all three of us away from Catholicism, and I think two of us away from just God in general. So in my experience, when you force things on people, right? Force meets resistance. I said that on the last show.
Yeah.
Eventually they're going to resist you. So if you're constantly forcing this on them, like, look at the purge, look at what they're doing here, look at this, like, eventually they're going to believe that you've lost the plot, and they're not
Yeah.
going to listen to you anymore.
And that's probably why I have such a hard time like extending grace and sympathy to people, is because like, my Thanksgiving dinners when I was like 7 years old was not the crazy uncle. It was all of my uncles, my grandfather, my dad, even my aunt, grandmother, great aunts. They were all sitting around talking about like, oh, did you see like what they're going to be trying to do with Bitcoin here? Oh, did you see what they're trying to do? So like I grew up even as an 8-year-old where like that's the majority of what was spoken about, on Thanksgiving. A lot of these things, like a lot of deeper concepts. And maybe that comes from like, and I try to be humble with this, but like maybe it comes because my family was just a very vigilant family, a very well-read family. So that's why they found these things to be more commonly talked about. That's why it was for me, extending this to like normies is like, it's harder for me because I grew up in an environment where it was widely accepted, like it's normal. And that's more so on my dad's side than my mom's side. But even on my mom's side, there's no really like cultural split. Like it's really just it's just the gradient would be those who are paying a lot of attention to those who are paying some attention, but we all still kind of sit on the same side of the aisle on the political spectrum. So that's why I've always like found it odd that people have always had like these breakups and schisms in their family, but it makes sense given the fact of like, we know that, the nuclear family's been under attack from multiple different methods. So it makes sense why most other families structured is entirely different. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that's been my experience with it. So it's why I have less of an understanding of a way to kind of like broach messaging to people.
Well, I guess with the family stuff specifically, my family is very similar, and there's a lot of people paying attention in it. But also, they wait till the casual guests have left to really get into it at the dinner table. That's usually coffee and dessert conversation.
Right.
But I think how you deliver a message is just important as what the message is. Just as who the message come from is just as important as what the message is, right?
Yeah.
So if it's coming from the angry guy that's always yelling, why is nobody listening? It's not an effective message. And if you're delivering it in a way that is counterproductive to your goals, then it's not an effective message. So I try to be very careful about how I deliver messages, when and in what way.
Yeah, no. And that's something I've like in the last year have really been having to think about, is like the way to message across, because it is a battle between ensuring that you don't water down your message for the sake of making the message palatable. And I think that's like where the rubber's been meeting the road, why you see such a breakup in the right-wing sphere, specifically when it comes to just simple things like modesty, because you have a strong sect of people who have now gotten to the point where they're just unwilling to accept any more compromise on the values. And so that's why it's like, yeah, dude, it's a struggle. It's tough to navigate. But again, not everybody can be a salesperson. There's successful salespeople, and there's those who have the job for a couple of days and then bounce because they can't do it, because they can't find a way to make their message heard in the best way that it needs to be. But with that being said, let me go ahead. I want to swing over the sponsor for today's show. I want to not make sure I miss this. You got it on screen here. If I make this a little bit bigger. So you would see this in my tweet. I made this some time ago. My first sponsor, my only sponsor, The Mean Tweets. They are a conservative and mega apparel clothing company. They have a lot of other things like accessories too. You can see like the like stickers as well as tumblers that come separately. You can buy those. They have a bunch of items. I think the store's got well over, I think it's at least like, a few thousand different items they have to look through. But the promo code RedPill10 gets you 10% off. I always go ahead and I point to the Bats or Maps one because I just love the design. And Maps meaning, minor attracted person. So this one is a very, very, mega brand. It's less so conservative. I will say that. But go ahead and reach out to them if you've seen something you like. Definitely, It helps support them. It helps support me. It's essentially just a guy and his wife, with a printing press, trying to do their best, to help fight the culture war. And I say this as often as I can. The best way I can sell that to you is exactly what we were even talking about on the show, which is, if you don't want to use your words, you don't want to use messaging, you don't even have to think about trying to get an idea across. Well, the next best way to do that besides your words is by putting it on a t-shirt and wearing it around all day. And I think that does a pretty good job for, getting your point across, or at least letting it be known how you feel about something. So again, promo code RedPill10, 10% off. It helps me, helps them. It's a good deal, and I appreciate it very much. Moving on from there, though, you could see the back.
Can I jump in real quick?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Before you back up.
If he's listening, I want a Pistols for Pedophiles shirt. Right? That's what I want. If he's listening, I've decided that's the shirt I want.
Okay. I'll send him a message.
On the show.
Let me write that down.
Let him know. That's the shirt I want.
Okay. Pistols for Pedophiles. No, you're good. I'll send him a message on Facebook. He might already have one. Who knows? I'll look at the shop actually later on, see if I can find one that's similar. But I was going to say, you saw the title on the second half of what we wanted to talk about, which was the State of the Union address, recapping some of the things that happened there, because I don't think a lot of this was covered nearly as well as it should have been. And I see that to a couple points. The first being is that Biden says bad word. And what I mean by that is Biden went ahead and said the quiet part out loud. He said that Lincoln Riley, what he meant, Laken Riley, was murdered by an illegal. So I have the article here from the New York Post. I'll go ahead and pull it up on my screen here. Biden sparks outrage as he apologizes for using illegal to describe Laken Riley's accused migrant killer. It's wild all these news media companies have to have all these ads. But it's funny because, oh my gosh, another one. That's a great picture of him. But he comes back and he's apologizing for it now. He says, I shouldn't have used illegal. It's undocumented. He goes, and look, when I spoke about the difference between Trump and me, one of the things I talked about in the border was his. The way he talks about vermin, the way he talks about these people polluting the blood. I talked about what I'm not going to do, what I won't do. I'm not going to treat any, I'm assuming that's the real quote, of these people with disrespect. Look, they built the country. So again, he's saying illegals built this country. The reason our economy is growing is because of illegals, is what Biden's saying. We have to control the border and more orderly flow. But I don't share his view at all, continued Biden. And it was one of what I think Surge.com with Tim Pool had said that 113 gaffes entirely throughout the speech. He literally could not speak nearly at all. There's some crazy photos you can see that are floating around on X of it just shows his skin is pulled back really badly. There's some that looks like he's wearing a face mask. I mean, his eyes are insane at different points. The whole thing was, again, borrowed from his campaign speeches, from previous speeches he's put on. And it was a big joke. But beyond that, there was another, forgive me, I keep burping. There was another crazy incident. Now I have this on X here too, which is that I have the video. We'll play that afterwards here in a second, which is Steve McCoy. You could see this picture here on the right. He was screaming during the State of the Union, and he was arrested at the State of the Union because he was crying out to Joe Biden to remember his son, and his son perished at Abbey Gate, which, if those of you who aren't familiar, that would have been the withdrawal from Afghanistan. So this man's son was one of the few individuals who lost his life. I shouldn't say few, was one of the individuals who lost his life due to an ignorant decision made specifically by Biden, and that was wholeheartedly done, through executive command by Biden. So I'm going to go ahead and pull back up. Let's see. Where's the video clip here? So this is the clip, actually. So they have the picture here. I believe it's just going to be an audio clip. We don't need to play the whole thing. But I didn't want to get you to listen. Americans. Oh, forgive me. That's really loud. Pull it down a little bit.
Deserve the freedom to be safe. And America is safer today than when I took office. Year before I took office, murder rates went up 30%. 30% they went up.
So you can clearly hear the dude losing his mind. I can barely hear what he said, but it was very clear. I heard Abbey Gate. I'll play a little bit more of this.
The biggest increase in history. It was then, through my American Rescue Plan, which every American voted against, I might add.
And that's essentially it. Now, the fact that he gets walked out and arrested is absurd. I just think, for one, like, how I get he was being disorderly, but just walk the dude out. The fact that you would go ahead and go follow through with arresting this dude, it brings up the fact of, Sean Ryan had put up this video, which was like, this is the reason why, and we talked about this earlier, like, police even have a worse connotation than military. And it's because, like, how could you, as, those men in uniform, knowing what this guy was yelling about, I'm sure he had conversations with these guys as they're walking him out of the assembly hall. And he's, telling them exactly what the situation is. And those guys still choose to swallow whole-throatedly the boot of which is the Biden administration and go ahead and arrest the guy. And it's beginning to be like, dude, there's got to be some kind of individual agency. Otherwise, like, how could you not blame people who sit here and go, look at these cops, look at these pigs? Because I would have quit right there. I would have resigned. I'd have been like, I'm not arresting this dude. Like, fine me, punish me, whatever way you deem fit. But I'm not arresting this guy because he was yelling at the president for the president killing his son. Like, I am sorry. But maybe you feel differently, Donnie.
Do you think I do? No,
No.
I don't feel differently. I do want to remind you that, like, this is after they destroyed policing, and it's also in DC where, like, the police aren't necessarily probably so much for the people as they are just for the politicians. Though I don't want to hate on all police, but, like, the fact that they arrested him, you said he's being disorderly. Like, I challenge any parent to lose a child and not be disorderly about it.
Yeah.
To walk him out and arrest him is atrocious behavior. Like, a good portion of this speech was atrocious. Like, he called her Lincoln Riley. He doesn't even know her name. She's in the news everywhere. She's all over the place. Like, you don't pay attention to what's actually happening here. He didn't know her name. And then he called the guy an illegal, and next day he's walking it back. Said the quiet part out loud on accident. Can't do that. And, like, one thing, like, I think a lot of people are obviously focusing on him being incompetent and out of his mind, but he was an evil guy long before he was incompetent and out of his mind. So, we had a whole show about, like, the Democrat Party being the party of the KKK. Like, he was a big supporter of Robert Byrd, big fan of him. He was menteed by Robert Byrd. So, like, he was a bad dude before he was some saddled, confused man destroying the country,
I know, and that's what's crazy is, like, he was a terrible person, while he had all of his cognitive faculties. People always, point to the GI crime bill, but there's a lot more than that. I mean, the dude, like, was a notorious plagiarizer, like, multiple instances. I believe one of those instances was the reason he rescinded his presidential campaign earlier in his political career was because he was getting annihilated by the media for calling out these things. And I mean, let me go back to the disorderly thing. Like, the reason I'm saying that is, like, I can understand, a cop following the basic process of, like, walking him at least out of the room. I'm not saying to charge him with disorderly conduct, but in that situation, maybe you walk him out of the room, get him to cool off a little bit and be like, dude, okay, like, your point was heard. You're probably going to be in the news, but, like, if you go back in there, can you at least promise us, like, you're going to at least try to be chill about this and continue through the union? I think that would have been the way that you would have handled that situation. But the fact that they go right to arresting him, and you and I both know, I mean, we've both been arrested, I'd fair to say, there's conversations that happen as you're being walked from where you got arrested. Like you're talking to these dudes, they're going through the processes. And to think that like there was no amount of conversation where he had tried mentioning to the cops what he was screaming about and that it fell on deaf ears is like, I just can't connect that, man. Like, was there not one good soul here that was like, guys, why don't we like just let him cool off? Like, let's kind of like walk this back. And at least have one guy, maybe the sergeant, to be like, hey, like, you know, it's on me. Like if they get mad at us for me not doing this, then like I'll take it. It'll be on me, and I'll do my best to take the responsibility for that. But it doesn't happen. These guys just go along with it. They just do it. And it's one of the reasons why I have such a difficult time defending policing in this country, is because like it is like the humanity has been entirely removed from it, almost completely.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is true. It does seem that way. But again, you're forced to see those instances. Very rarely do you get to see the instances that happen every day of cops doing exactly what they should be doing.
That's a good point.
You know what I mean? So it's easy to get blackpilled when they blow up these instances, but you have to remember, like, I mean, I guess you just said it, like, we both been arrested. Like, I've had more police interaction than I'd like to admit. And in my experience, I very rarely have bad experiences. I mean, obviously nobody wants to get arrested, but there's maybe one case where it wasn't, fully deserved.
Yeah.
So it's you know what I mean? So I have enough
Yeah.
first-hand experience to figure out that, when I've been arrested, usually it's deserved, and my behavior definitely has always been the deciding factor of how the interaction goes.
Yeah.
So, it's hard for me to have first-hand experience, even when it's against me, where I've seen them do what they're supposed to be doing in the way that they're supposed to be doing it. And I've been a gentleman getting arrested, and I've been an animal getting arrested. And both times it was deserved, and both times they were just reacting to my behavior. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I get that it's easy to be blackpilled, but like, when there's the videos that are them doing wrong are always blown up, and the countless videos of them doing exactly what they should be doing are never seen. And people already have a tendency to be very attuned to seeing the negative things in life, because that way you can fix the problem. But that focus always comes at the cost of seeing all the positive that they do.
Yeah.
My wife was recently involved in a hit and run. And I'm one of those guys. I could protect my house. I wasn't there. Even if I was there, the car was damaged. What was I going to do? Chase him? But the cops caught him, right? I would have been totally screwed if they didn't.
Yeah.
And despite being, the kind of person that does believe in self-defense, without the police able to catch that guy, I would have just been screwed. You know what I mean? So I can see the things that would be difficult even for a self-regulated militia to help people with, like things like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. And I think that's honestly like a really good entire defense of policing. So let's focus in then on this specific instance, because I would imagine the cops they use for the State of the Union address would not be rookies, right? I would garner to say that they're probably getting some of their better guys in there to operate these instances, right? Because you're protecting the president. And pair that too with the fact that I imagine this would have been Capitol Police, not even part of a natural precinct. So when I'm thinking of that, I'm thinking that like these guys should and would have a bit more ability to have discernment when they are adjudicating like what's occurring. But maybe I'm entirely wrong on that. I just view it as like, especially a situation like that, like it would be so easy for one of those cops to have been like, hey dude, like are we really doing this? Like, are we really going to arrest this dude? And I just like, that's the part that I can't wrap my head around, because like, I know if I was in that situation, I would be that guy who would be like, okay, no, like I don't want to do this, dude. Like I'm not doing this. Like you guys can do it. Like, but I'm not going to be a part of it. Don't make me be a part of it. And I don't care if it makes me like, I get suspended from work or something like that. I mean, obviously it would like hurt my family and I would take that onus, I'll Uber for those like 5 days to try to make something back. But like, for me, principle always overtakes anything else. Principle will always be what I fall back on. I will never sacrifice or compromise for any other sake, and I think that's a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow, because in this instance, it probably would end up garnering punishment for one of those officers. And it's just like, would you rather be the guy who stood up for someone else, or would you rather be the guy who carried the innocent man to jail? I just like, when you put it like that, it's an easy decision for me to make.
So when we're talking about this specific instance, I want to start with, I agree with you. I think the way you said you would have handled it would be the right way to handle it. I believe that's how I would have handled it too. Right? I get that you can't let the guy scream through the State of the Union. I get walking him out and trying to say, hey man, I get it. I have kids. I understand. But it's also my job to make sure you're not disrupting this. Right? Arresting him is insane to me. That being said, one thing that you said that I disagree with is you're saying this is Capitol Police. They got the good ones on it. They have more probably likelihood of being able to act right. I think those things that you mentioned are exactly the reasons they didn't act right. Right? They had the experienced Capitol Police guys on this. Where do you think Capitol Police isn't your local county town police? You know what I mean? They work directly for these politicians, not for the people of the area. So I think the things where you're saying they should know better and they should be able to act right are the exact reasons why that guy was arrested. They work for the administration.
Yeah. And that's also what I was thinking too. Like, as you were saying that, is like, if they're more experienced and they're higher up in the Capitol Police, it would probably lean or imply that it's because they have been the ones who are like looking the other way for Nancy Pelosi. They're probably the ones who are like, yeah, I'll carry the BMG. I'll carry it up there so we can, point out these protesters for January 6th. Like, and you're probably right about that. I guess I'm just imagining, in a hypothetical, you would think, the higher you move up, you would imagine you would have more authority over the individual decisions you get to make. And I guess, yeah, like that's naive and not looking at it from the lens of like, these people work for the politicians and not for any citizen. Go ahead.
And the administration, do you think they are evil?
No, 100%.
Okay. Do you think that they have good, righteous men on the payroll to protect them, or do they also probably not have the best people around them with the best intentions?
I don't like talking in absolutes outside of Christianity.
No,
but
of course.
Nothing
is absolute. There are good people, there are bad people everywhere.
But you're right though. Like I agree with what you're trying to get across, which is like, yeah, it's like the mass majority of them are not going to be the type that would be you and I.
Well, if I was in an administration and I understood that the things that I was doing were to hurt the people that I govern, I wouldn't want righteous men debating on whether they should protect me. I would want people that I vetted, that I know will follow my orders without a second thought and without any of their own morality or righteousness involved. And I would probably put a fair amount of work into making sure I was surrounded with those people, personally.
Yeah, you get the loyalists in there. And it's crazy because we're talking about this when the mass media, mainstream media, acts as if the cult, the people who follow in lockstep are all the MAGA groups, all of these people, right? And it's like, in reality, it's like, it's entirely backwards, dude. It's like the people who march and ensure that, they're all in some operant hive mind are these loyalists, loyal to the administration, loyal to the progressivism, loyal to the leftism. But it's just like, again, it goes back to the fact of like, that world doesn't work like that, dude. Like the world is evil, evil exists, and you have to always operate under that lens. And so you're right. Like
Evil exists, but the world is not evil. There are evil people here, and there are people that believe and do evil things. But the world is not evil. I think, honestly, there's probably more good people than evil people. But the problem is that good people aren't as driven to do good as evil people are driven to do evil, because evil is very much incentivized, and doing good, a lot less so.
See, I actually disagree with that. I think the majority of people are actually bad. Or I guess I should say, I wouldn't say good or bad. Let me say this. I think that there are more purely evil people than there are purely good people. But I think the middle is majoritively filled up with those who are neutral to the polarized ends. But of those who are neutral, the majority of those who are neutral lean towards being evil. And I would back that up. It's just substantiated by the fact of like original sin, right? Like I'm a Christian. I believe that people were sinners, right? So with that belief in mind, I think that most people are inclined to make the poor decisions, to do things that would be seen as evil. And I get what you're saying though, which is the fact of like good people are less inclined to stand up and defend things, as an evil person is inclined to exploit a system or to abuse a loophole. So I agree with that. That's why
We probably also have very different definitions on what a good person and an evil person is.
Yeah.
Also.
I'm only saying that strictly through the Christian lens. That's the only metric I'm saying good versus evil from. And so by that metric, it's like everybody's bad. You know, like everybody's a sinner. Nobody's perfect. And it's the few.
Being evil and sinning is easy. Doing good is hard work.
Exactly that, which is why that's more evidence for my argument, which is I think that the world leans evil more so than it does lean good, which is why it shouldn't be surprising that these kind of minor instances that have drastic consequences occur nonstop. But again, it's opposite of the police thing of always seeing all of the bad videos all the time, because that's algorithmically driven. That's like, for one, I mean, if that was from the original like Facebook algorithm, which was based on the shares, right? So like videos that got shared more would land on more people's homepage. But it's because, what do you think gets shared the most? Well, things that piss you off. And if it pisses you off, you're like, dude, look at this thing. This thing that just pissed me off. And so you send it to the other person because you know they're going to get pissed off. And that's why, police brutality videos reign supreme in almost everything. I mean, I encourage everybody right now to go on Facebook and start scrolling through videos. I guarantee you can't scroll 10 videos without seeing some kind of police incident, some kind of dash cam video, some kind of instance where a person gets harmed or some kind of bad thing occurs, because that is what is the main driver in a lot of these algorithmic platforms.
Yeah, but again, for your argument though, you're also very prone to being able to see negative things. You personally,
Yeah.
very prone to see negative things, and you're also arguing that those are largely what's put in front of you. So what I'm saying is, when you start to feel like most of the world is evil, I'm begging you to remember that those things are what you're supposed to see, is
Right.
the negative and the evil. You're not supposed to see people doing good. Like how much of news is the old school stuff where they used to go out and be like, oh, this person's feeding, the homeless, and look at how much good they're doing. Now what do? They arrest that old lady that's feeding the homeless. So
Yeah.
you're seeing negative because that's what you're supposed to see. They don't want you to see the people doing good. And those news stories aren't news stories anymore. They don't even make the cut. It's all, hey, this person murdered a person there and burglary over here. So you're not seeing the good anymore because it's not put forward as often.
And speaking
And
of,
it's for the exact reasons you just brought up, views, Somebody helping their community doesn't get views like somebody destroying it.
it's that social clout. It's a powerful tool. And speaking of the homeless thing, like in that same exact framing, there's a trend that was started. I think it was rather, quelled rather quickly, But there was a trend of people who would go out and pretend like they were giving food to homeless people, only to like smack it out of their hands the moment they took it, or to like, or to like do something to the food. And like, those are things where it's like, that's where the algorithm has now started literally directing people's behaviors from what was originally what, you know, with a Mr. Beast style video would be successful doing the giving the homeless, is now fallen entirely flat on its surface because the algorithm is a slave to what gets driven by the algorithm. So with that being said, it then forces people to adapt and then do and mimic behaviors that will then be perceived by the algorithm as being worthy of being shared and going viral and virality. And that's why I argue against the individuality aspect. I know we had an argument between me and Nick. I can't remember what episode that was, where he thinks it's a good thing that we keep pushing this extreme individuality, where I'm arguing against it, where, you know, I think people are already individuals enough. I think what you see now is people are under the guise of being an individual. What they really mean is like, change your gender, claim that you're water queer XY, you know, and it's being driven to the points of like, these people are like, I'm an individual and I'm actually so different that like I have tiger blood and I've been feeling this for a while. And I'm also an Aquarius. And because I'm an Aquarius, it's not just the hyper, because there's like two different types of the horology scopes type things. And that's when you see these, it's common now. I mean, go on TikTok, you see all of these low accounts that have almost no subscribers, nobody following them. And it's a lot of the same level of content where they are trying to stretch or I guess convey to the people who watch their videos that they are so unique and they are so different, to the point that they're just blatantly convincing themselves of lies of like they are these things because they saw some like half mangled post from somebody who wasn't well meaning, and they were like, oh, that's me. And then they're like, I must be a tiger.
Jump in.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna have to jump in here for a second, and I'm super unhappy with you right now for making me defend Nick, but
Okay.
I'm gonna do it anyway.
Okay.
Right? The people you're talking about aren't extreme individualists. They were the first people to conform and do what they were told to do. Right? The
Yep.
people changing their gender aren't individuals. They are the hardest conformists.
That's why they said under
You
the
know,
guise of
I
individuality. Under the guise of individuality.
I know, but what I'm saying is but it's not real individuality. So think about for a second, if people thought like that, like you need to be an individual. It promotes self-thought, right? Like I'm like that. I dress funny. Like I listen to music that most people don't listen to.
Yeah.
Like I consider myself super individualistic, but all of those traits that make me like that also make me very aware of my own opinions, because I couldn't just borrow them from somebody else. I had to actually think about them to find my own standpoint. And I think a lot of the collectivism that you see today had to come at the cost of the individualism that we were taught to embrace as children.
Yeah.
And I think the people that are pushing this aren't individuals. They're part of a collective. So if those people were all individuals from the first place, we wouldn't be fighting a collective. And we certainly wouldn't be doing it, fighting a collective as individuals. You know what I mean? So I actually agree with him that if the kind of individualism that was pushed like when we were kids, not where it's like, you know, adopt some kind of crazy belief to make yourself more interesting, right?
Yeah.
Like, because that's what they're doing when they're identifying as animals or changing their gender or being non-binary. They're just trying to get the same attention that you or I would have done at that age, but we were taught to be individuals and gain a personality that is interesting. They were taught to just conform into ideas that if they had those ideas attached to them, they instantly were interesting. So they never had to develop a personality to be interesting people.
Yeah. I guess
So I would argue that Nick might be right in the fact that extreme individualism could have been a solve at one point. but we're kind of past that point, in my opinion.
Well, listen, I don't disagree with the idea that people should be rugged individualists. I think that that's what we should be. I'm saying that they're still using the same language. Like when I was in school, they said, be yourself. Like, don't worry about this and this and this. Like, da da da. I'm arguing that that's the same language that's being used now that's leading to the collectivism. So like it's like almost like a coded language of like be yourself is like you're allowed to be queer. I don't know where that happened or why it happened, but it seems to be coded that way, where the people who do commonly preach, I'm just be yourself, like don't be scared, is I think it's two main avenues. It's someone who is morbidly obese and is like, I'm just being myself. My natural self is 400 pounds. Or it's being used to what we had just said, which is the transgender agenda, which is like, yeah, be yourself. Like, don't be afraid to chop it off, And so like, I'm saying like the language is like, it's coded now where the be yourself is still there. Like the teachers are saying the same things, but the understanding, what people come to understand and perceive that as, isn't self-agency. It's like a doorway to collectivism, as you had said, which is like, go join the consensus group. and that's the thing too, is like, I would argue like, dude, was self-agency like ever preached, outside of like, your one history teacher who actually has his like, his nose to the right winds? Like, because for me, it felt like it was always kind of consensus based. Like even in school, like I think the be yourself was even at that point being stretched to like females specifically, where, and again, this is more so before the trans stuff. So I would argue even then it was like the coming out of the closet. It's like, don't be afraid to be yourself, more so being coded to like, don't be afraid to come out of the closet. Like we'll accept you even if your parents don't accept you. Like there's plenty of ways we can handle this and how it goes down. Or with women, when they're like, when abortion was a lot more of a hotter topic, it's like, don't be afraid. Like, don't be afraid to be yourself. Like, don't be afraid to be a feminist. Don't be afraid to be a radical feminist. Don't be afraid to be a boss girl. And so like, I think even in both eras of like my era and then like the current era, it was like coded language that sure they were saying the right things, but for some reason, and maybe I can't articulate this very well, but for some reason, most people perceive that as like, oh, I'm going to be like everybody else. And it's like, that's what I don't understand, because it seems like the audience knew what the be yourself meant. And the be yourself was pointing to the door, which was like, oh yeah, like it's okay to be gay. Because that seemed to be the most commonly path taken from the people who accepted the advice and then make those YouTube videos or those reels and are like, hey guys, like, I'm so glad I became myself. Like, this is the 97th day of a man. And I just, that's what I see. So I don't disagree with the fact that individuality, like, is a desirable characteristic. I agree with you in the fact that, like, we're at this point now where there's just a lot of people, and with the way ideas kind of work, it's maybe a little bit too difficult to pull all of that back. But man, it's just, self-agency is something that, like, I don't even think can be quite honestly taught. It has to be like shown through experience, like operately.
Maybe, and I definitely get what you're saying, right? Because it's the whole, you're special no matter what, and be who you are no matter what. Well, the problem with that is most of you aren't special, and a lot of you are assholes. When you are yourself. And sure, that's great messaging, when you're a teenager, don't follow the crowd, but a lot of your life you kind of have to a certain extent. Like, I could have lived my whole life as a gutter punk, but I wouldn't be here living a happy life, taking care of my family. It's something I survived largely. But again, it's that whole message of like, you're not special. You just aren't, unless you are doing something to prove that you are. You're not special, and the world doesn't have to think you're special just because you're you. But I still think we need to start pushing the, be an individual, like reject these ideas just because somebody told you it's the right idea. Have you put any thought into it at all? you know, like, and some of it's so silly, like the transgender stuff specifically, like, come on, like if you can't answer basic questions that children used to be able to answer, maybe it's not that great of an ideology, right? But I think pushing individualism in the right way is still good for society. And I want to go back to where those individuals with their unique ideas didn't feel afraid to say them out loud, because the best part about the whole thing is if it's a good idea, great, now we all know it. If it's a bad idea, great, we all know it and we know you're fucking crazy. You know what I mean?
Yes. It's a lack of the free expression. And it's funny, but that's how I feel. Like, I'm glad you said it like that, because especially with the transgender stuff, is like, you know, like, because man, and let's give a little history lesson, because you know I was reading a bit about, you know, third and fourth wave feminism to prepare for the debate I'm going to have with Nick, or I guess our discussion on it. And you know, so I've heard the story of John Money so many times, but those who aren't familiar, John Money was a physicist who operated off the book of, I think it was Robert Mullen, which was Sex and Gender, furthering the ideas essentially of the fact that gender is a construct. Gender and sex are entirely distinctly separate. So the story is, and this is also tied into, okay, I'll just save that for now. So there's two boys. I believe they're twins. Mother and father.
They were twins.
Yeah, they were twins. The unfortunate aspect is one of the twins had a botched circumcision. Because of this, the parents did not know what to do. Because at this time, clearly, there's probably not very many things that you could do. Because this was right around the 1965, I believe, they're 68. I can't remember. Fact check me. So what John Money says, no joke, is, well, we can chop it off and we'll make a fake vagina. And the parents said, okay. And that's the story. Now, it's not the end of the story, obviously, because it gets much darker than that. Around when he turned 12 or 13 years old, clearly he's growing up, he's hitting his puberty, and the poor boy began to understand something was drastically wrong, only to later unalive himself because he could not bear to handle the truth of his situation and of his existence. My heart goes out to that kid. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to be in his position, to be one of the first human beings that were experimented upon in the name of things that defy the natural order of law and things that defy, like, literally just God. So with that being said, that again stretches it to the point of what she was said, which is, have you even thought about it? Like, come on. Which is, yes, like transgenderism literally is, with what they're doing with the gender change surgeries, is finding, I think it's phalloplasty, is that the word I'm looking for? Is where they take they'll take skin from the forearm to make a forever flaccid penis. They will take, and I forgive me because I don't know what they do for the other way around. I think the other way is they take the flesh from the penis gland and they convert that into a fake vagina. Forgive me, I don't really know the specifics of it, nor do I wish to know the specifics of it, but it's still all Frankenstein surgery-esque stuff that's just meant to put in dysfunctional body organs to appease the mental illness, or rather to confirm the mental illness of said individuals who deal with these things, all to get clapped and cheered on by every social institution and all of the people who virtue signal, despite them feeling deep down the complete opposite. Again, this is one of those things where it's like, I cannot find the empathy nor the sympathy in my heart for the parents who push these things through. And even with that being said, too,
Again,
we'll go ahead. Were you going to say something? Let me rant the whole time.
yeah. So the thing is, I've met these people, right? I've met the trans people. I've even met young trans people and their parents. You used to throw axes with a young girl that was going by he, him pronouns, and going through it, and I got to talk to this person's parents, and I think she was maybe 13 or 14. She threw axes at the venue, and her parents would come with her every time when it was competition day. So, I got to spend a lot of time with us. And, there's a lot of people there that didn't believe in the transing issue. And all of those people treated that family with respect. And talking to the parents, they're just lost. Like their kid is going through a phase that they don't understand. They understand it's a phase when I talk to them. They get it, but they don't really understand it, and they're afraid to shut it down because they are afraid that's just going to encourage this and push them more to that community that's, probably brainwashing their kid. So I can empathize with these parents, especially with this whole self, the life-saving gender affirming care narrative. Like these parents are scared to death that their kid is going through a phase, and they're no different than any parents from the 70s or 80s that were scared, like, my kid's gone goth, like, what's happening? Are they worshiping the devil?
Yeah.
Like, what do I do here? So I do empathize with those parents, and I do have kids, and I have in many cases found myself in situations where I say, okay, I know what's happening, but I don't know what to do here. So I do empathize with those parents quite a bit, and they are in a weird position that they never thought would be a position they were going to be in. You know what I mean? As parents. So,
listen, I empathize with that portion of it.
Sticky.
The part that I don't empathize with is then allowing irreversible instances then to be done, whether it's surgery or the HRT with the hormone blockers. That's where it's like, okay, you have, this has been in the news for too long for you to go in blindly and just accept what the doctor says. You take into the fact too, like there's been a lot of other things here recently that would make you be like, I'm not going to just take the first opinion of what this doctor may tell me. And maybe it's best that I kind of look around and get a good gauge of what I think maybe the issue too.
Atlas, me and you have a strong God-given distrust for authority. We already don't trust these people. Most people trust authority. When a doctor is telling you this is going to save your kid's life, it's a little different than some stranger that you don't know anything about on the internet saying you're destroying your kid's life. You know what I mean?
I do.
So
and it's manipulated by the doctors to say that.
Have that. It is. It's manipulated by the doctors and the people that manipulate the doctors and these foundations that give money. It's manipulated by all of them. But like, and I'm not saying that there aren't parents that are transing their kids. I've seen it in Hollywood. What are the odds that you have 3 trans kids?
Yeah,
the odds are astronomical.
Yeah.
I don't talk to those people. I talk to normal people that have normal kids that are confused, as kids tend to be. I was a confused kid. I'm sure you were. We figured it out eventually, but kids are susceptible to things like this. And parents are susceptible to an authority figure telling them you could be condemning your kid to death if you do not give them these hormones. It's a very manipulative message, but I have empathy for the parents, for sure.
Well, isn't distrust in the government American value?
It used to be. You know what's funny is I was just thinking about this the other day. I used to hate saying the Pledge of Allegiance in school. Like, you're gonna make me stand here like a puppet with all these people reciting this pledge. And as soon as they're like, well, we don't do that anymore, I'll come to my office and I'll say the Pledge of Allegiance to my flag. They'll be like, all right, well, if we don't do this anymore, I still do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's because I have that baked in distrust for authority, right? So it's a gift, but you can't really do much but feel bad that people don't, some people don't have that gift, right? Like they are looking for an authority figure and they don't have the information to judge who that authority figure is. So another authority figure just tells them, oh, that's the authority figure you need to listen to.
But that's like, I just like, I get it. I understand how it happens. I'm just like, why did our culture become this? Like, why did they just start accepting whatever the authority figure told them? To me, it's like, you said that and I'm like, yeah, but isn't that like one of the most American values you can have is to like be aware of the distrust of of the government that you should hold. You should have a healthy distrust for people who are in these positions. And then maybe it is maybe it is because we are not only because we're like literally so far away from our roots of Americans, but I think from the front of like if you were culturally like a homogenized Christian, in what way would you look at the way that they propose these procedures and you look at your Bible and you go, yep, it's all good here. You know, and it's like it's a lack of having roots to principle on any front, and lacking roots to American principles, lacking roots to religious principles. It's like people say all the time that they're androgynous and these males look like females and females look like men. Well, dude, that's just one aspect of it. It's everyone. Their values are becoming androgynous. They're just like these gray, like whatever the big guy said, dude, is what I believe, and that's just like disheartening, disappointing, and defeating all at the same time. Because go ahead, my bad.
Oh, I was just going to jump in real quick. The people that because you're talking about the Christians, the people that destroyed the policing are the same people that destroyed Christianity, right? Like it's not, and it's the image problem because they love using that. It's not cool to be Christian, right? It's not cool to be Republican. They use that all the time. But they destroyed those values. They destroyed the family values. They destroyed the American values that you're talking about, that, you know, you should have a healthy distrust for their government. They got rid of all that stuff and they said, no. Government is your mom. Government is your dad. We're here to take care of you. And they bought that lie, and they bought it from the people that they trusted to tell them the truth.
And it's just, I refuse it. Like I refuse it.
Me too.
I just wanted to stop.
But in the other sense, though, right? Because let's talk about this while we're on it. If I refuse it from them, but government comes along on the other side and says, "Hey, we're the extreme right-wing government, and we're here to take some power to clean all this mess up," I oppose that too.
Yeah.
Because there's no good that you get from acting like the government is your mom and dad and giving them more power to fix the problems in your life.
Yep.
It's bad either way, which is why I'm a radical centrist and I can camp the middle so hard without being budged, is because I understand that either way you give the government power, whether it's to get rid of the bad things that you don't want in life or bring about the good things that you do. Like if you give them power, it will be used against you eventually.
And that's why I think the best way to go about it, which we talked about this off air last night, which is literally strip the federal government. Like almost like strip it as down as like just cut ATF, remove the FBI, eliminate the CIA, dude, turn it into one agency, combine all who was left that you didn't have to gut out, and return the power back to the states. Like, I'm okay with...
The president should be like a postmaster for your city.
Yeah.
Who's your postmaster? You don't know. Why? Because he doesn't affect your daily life.
Yeah, exactly that. Like, get rid of all that crap so then he only has to worry about the border. Like, go fix it right now. We actually removed every responsibility you have as president besides the border. You have nothing else to do besides go and stand in Texas and figure out how to fix that thing. Because I would be okay with returning to the states reigning supreme over the federal government. I would be okay that allows for a much less, authoritative body. It allows for much more freedom of range of opinion, range of value. And then again, at that point, you have the freedom then and be like, okay, well, like, listen, like my state's kind of slacking on these things I believe in. Like, I'm moving to Minnesota. And forgive me, Minnesota's super blue, but I'm only just saying a random state. But it would allow for these things to open back up and everybody not be so holding supreme to what the feds tell you must do. And that's how the states generally operate, is they're like, well, the feds told us we have to do this, but here's where we have gray area in our state where we can do a little bit differently. And it's like, that's not good enough, man. The federal government should not be able to, top down commit all of these states into following so many of these different things. But we're going to see that. I mean, dude, you have Texas wanting to secede, California wanting to secede, but for different reasons. and what was it, Iowa, the different sections of Iowa and Oregon want to join together because like there people across the board are like, dude, we're not being represented at all. Like no part of me feels represented. I'm paying taxes while watching my road get destroyed. I am paying taxes while I watch you hand illegal immigrants $3,000 a piece. You march them over to the Hotel Marriott that's 10 feet from my apartment, and then I watch you bus them in daily, and then hand them phones. You hand them dinner cards. It's just like people are just had enough, and but again, speaking back to the federal stuff, right? Which is like it never should have been like this in the first place. This goes back to, again, like people weren't being vigilant throughout the previous generations. So it was just like this slow, like the slow evil working its way up little by little, grabbing an institution by institution. And again, because people don't listen to people like Yuri, people don't listen to, like, for one, almost anybody at all. And so we get to these points here in 2024 and everyone's like, man, how'd the world go to shit? Oh, bro, like maybe if you like read for like anything, dude, you'd have some idea of why this was happening. And again, that's why I kind of default back to like, it's hard to feel bad for people when they don't pay attention.
But again, I'm going to make you feel bad for these people.
No, I mean, I feel bad for them when they get harmed, and they like, when I see like, the McLaughlins, getting arrested because they brandished a shotgun while their house is surrounded by 100 people. Like, I feel bad for them.
But the previous generations that we're talking about that didn't have the hypervigilance that we have, it wasn't easy back then, right? Like these people had control of the radio and the TV, and that's how information was spread. It wasn't the internet where this information is all out there for anybody to see, as long as you already know what you're looking for, because it is. All this information is already out there to see if you can find it. But there was a point where this information wasn't out there like that, right? Like it was in books and stuff, but it was much harder to come across than just knowing where to look on the internet. You had to know, the right books to follow, or the right radio host and Paul Harvey's case and things like that.
Yeah,
like
the right authors.
It was just a lot harder to stay vigilant in previous generations, and we're lucky that we have hypervigilance in a generation where we're able to take full advantage of that and know things that people in previous generations never knew. They never had access to the amount of information that we have. So we are hypervigilant, but we're also blessed to be in a world where information is very easy to get to if you know what you're looking for.
Yeah, so I guess with that, I shouldn't be less angry at the previous generations and more angry at the current generation, who walks around for the most part with the summation of all human knowledge in the palm of their hand, still refusing to pay attention. Like it's half of these things are a couple Google searches away. And all it takes is a little bit of time, a little bit of effort. Now I know, that I know that I know that some of these things are not a Google search away and would take a little bit more effort. But for these normie kind of level things, yeah, for these normie kind of level things, it's like, dude, it would take you 10 minutes to listen to a Tim Pool segment to have your mind, blown open about the Ahmaud Arbery case. I mean, it's just like little things like that just people just don't do. And it's, again, because the bread and circuses, it's every person would much rather watch a TikTok of, some girl twerking than they would listen to a guy wearing a beanie talk about what he's mad about. And that's just the way it is. That's just the nature of these things. And that's how we have to navigate moving forward. But with that being said, we just crossed the 2-hour mark a little bit ago. I want to turn it back to you, Donnie. Do you have a closing statement before we go ahead and sign off?
No, use your hypervigilance. Look into some of this information. If you have questions, you can find me in Atlas's Twitter. Follow Atlas if you liked anything I said. I usually say don't bother me, but if you're genuinely interested and you'd like to ask a question or something like that, you can go ahead and message me.
Yeah, go and make sure you find Sensei Donnie. He's the master. He's up in the mountains ready to give some knowledge and drop it on people. All I'm going to say to end this off with is the people of Pittsburgh, I will be praying for you. I hope that you find it imperative to do whatever you can to prevent this from taking place on Monday. And again, I will also say too, my heart goes out to that father who lost his son for a decision that was made entirely erroneously, nonsensically, that resulted in the loss of your son. I hope that you don't get charged. I hope everything gets dismissed. I hope you find yourself with getting a good judge who's going to see the details of the facts and go, what the hell were these officers doing? So that being said, I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Thank you for joining me once again, Donnie. Subscribe to me on YouTube, follow me on X, all the fancy things. And Christ is King. God bless. Stay safe. Peace out, y'all. Take care.